This is a Security Weekly production. Welcome, everyone, to Stogie Geeks News. I'm your host, Paul Astorian, joined live in studio by Mr. William Cooper, who's here with us today. It's so nice to have you behind the news desk with me, Will.
Well, thank you, Paul. Great to be here. And kind of a dream come true, kind of this quasi-journalist that I am. I always wanted to do news behind a news desk.
And now we've made your dreams come true.
Absolutely, absolutely. Although, probably not the best news we're going to bring you today.
Stogie Geeks News is not regulated by the FCC because we are, in fact, a podcast. However, pending legislation for cigars and legislation by the FDA will make cigars regulated, which is somewhat ironic that we can say whatever we want on the podcast, but now there's all these new regulations that, well, not new. I mean, they've been pending for a long time, and I kind of feel like people are freaking out. We knew this was coming. We knew that things were happening. So, but what changed this week, Will?
The reality. Reality came in, and there were a lot of degrees that the FDA. Now, look, the FDA got regulations with the Family Tobacco Act that President Obama signed and Congress passed in 2009. So they had the authority to do this, but there were different degrees that this was going to happen. Probably the worst case scenario happened. Is it the end of the cigar industry? No. But it's going to change the cigar industry as we know it.
And so the 90 days, what's going to happen in 90 days?
So in 90 days, the FDA regulations will go into effect. And it was actually 90 days from yesterday. So we're looking at August 3rd, 2016 as a very, very key date because this is when the regulations go into effect.
Okay.
So there's a few scenarios. We have to look. There's a few dates that are involved with this that are very important. First of all, the first date is February 15th, 2007. If a product was out before February 15th, 2007, they don't need to worry.
They don't have to do anything.
They don't have to do anything. That product, as long as it was marketed, they don't have to comply with any regulation.
Okay.
So that's the good news. Anything after that August 3rd, 2016 date, we'll have to, and we'll get into what they have to do. They will be regulated and will have to apply for FDA approval to market that cigar.
Okay.
All right. Now comes, so that's for new stuff. And there's costs associated with that. So it's not a free thing you do, and there's time it's going to take to do that. Now comes everything in between that February 15th, 2007 date and the August 3rd date of 2016 because there's stuff on the market right now. So what will happen is there's going to be a period where those products will not have to be pulled from the shelf come August. The companies have 2 years to decide if they want to continue to market those products. If they want to continue to market those products, they can apply. They can apply to the FDA for authorization and approval for that. They'll get another year on top of that, awaiting the approval. So that's going to become the big question mark is because if you look at that 2007 date to 2016, there's a lot of stuff in there.
There's a lot of cigars that are in there.
There's a lot of cigars in there. Now, I see something very interesting with that, going back to that 2007 date. I see a lot of cigar companies now, they're going to reach back for some of these brands. Maybe some of these brands were marketed to a particular retail single shop. And I think they're going to try to take those national.
Right.
So I think you're going to see what's old suddenly become what's new. The last thing is that we're right on the brink of IPCPR. So I think you're going to see anything that was going to get announced now is going to get announced, and I think it'll hit the market. And if it's a success on the market, they'll apply for regulation. If it fails, it will just get removed from the market right now. But I think you're going to see probably the biggest.
Does it have to be removed from the market, or does it just prevent them from marketing the product?
From what I understand, it has to be removed from the market. So there's a point where, there's other things that have to go into play with this. And that's a very good question. So one of the things, for example, is the requiring of warning labels on packaging. That's a big deal. Okay, it's not just a matter. You've seen them on cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
But with cigars, it's going to be similar. Okay, but again, there's certain requirements that have to be made for that. And when you go submit a product for approval, you have to make sure you're complying with the requirements for putting that warning label on. Supposedly, if there's products after a certain date without that warning label, it's out of compliance, and there could be anything from a warning letter to arrest made. So we've seen similar things with the pharmaceutical industry happen. So it's not far-fetched that someone gets hauled off to jail, is what I'm saying with that.
And is that the retailer or the manufacturer or both that are held responsible for that warning label?
The answer is actually, from what I've been able to ascertain, both. Because on packaging, I think the manufacturer will be held accountable for that. But if retailers are going to sell cigars in like bundles or singles or trays, they're going to be required to have a warning label sign
in the store
close to the sales, the point of sale system. So, and you've seen similar things in liquor stores. So they could be held accountable in cases like that.
Interesting.
Yep.
So, I mean, what does this mean right now, Will?
Today.
I
think today there's going to be a scramble for the industry to kind of get hold of what's going to happen right now.
Right.
I think there's a lot of projects that are in the works. I do think that it's going to put a damper on future plans. I think like 2017, there's going to be a slowdown in the business. I think 2016, because of this window, the next 90 days, I think we could still see a lot of product come in there right now. So I think this will be a big IPCPR. The industry will slow down next year, but this is economics. The market will adjust, and eventually it's going to become supply and demand. Competitive things will come into play, and the good news is they can't shut down the cigar industry the way the Tobacco Family Act was written. So they can't shut it down, which is good.
And is there room for negotiations to take place from this point forward?
Not sure. That's where there's a few things going on in Congress right now. So there's the House and the Senate bills to actually still get, and I think we should say one thing. They were hoping for an exemption for premium cigars.
They didn't get it. Right.
But there's a couple of bills in Congress right now that have been around for a few years that are trying to get an exemption through the legislative branch. So whether there's some negotiating room in those, that could be, anytime a bill comes, there's markups done, and things can happen as well. There's also a couple of appropriations bills, which we've talked about on the show, that would be used to fund these initiatives. And again, there's some room for things in there. And in those appropriation bills is a predicate date that will shift it from 2007 to 2016. So that's something very much worth watching.
I gotcha.
Now, to kind of circle back to the question you have, there's also the possibility of litigation. And I know litigation is being pursued as an option. If litigation is pursued, then it has to be an injunction. Now, the injunction could just freeze everything, and we could be okay for a while until the courts hear it. Yeah, like the menthol debate was a very similar path that went down right now.
I got you.
So that's something worth watching as well. There are other things in this bill. I think just so you know, what does it mean to get? What are you going to have to do to get regulated? You're going to have to submit not only the things to show you have a warning label plan, but you're going to have to show that you're going to have a pre-market review of the ingredients in there. A lot of this was written for vapes.
Yes.
And with cigars, it's not. There are some cigars, I think, that have some products besides tobacco to use. But for the most part, what we smoke, it's 100% tobacco. You'd think it's an easy process, but we're dealing with the FDA here, which is not the case as well.
It sounds to me like there's going to be there's a lot of unknowns.
There's a lot of unknowns.
There's a lot of adjustments that are going to be made over time to figure out what that really means and how it actually works versus how it's written, because they've lumped hookah, pipe tobacco, vapes, which is not even tobacco, which blows me away, and cigars in the same thing. And I hope there's some fleshing out. However, those that have dealt with the FDA in the past probably have a pretty good perspective on, can predict how it's going to go down. But to me, when I read some of the things in the bill, it was very much like you were talking about, verifying the process and the ingredients that goes into the final product is something that I think is beneficial to vapes and needed in it because you got
And
people like I was telling you before, Will,
Right.
right? Like you and I like to smoke cigars. Let's say you and I like to do vape stuff
Right.
too. And we said, hey, you know what? Like here in the closet, in the back room of the studio, we're going to start mixing up some vape liquids.
Right.
Like we could go buy materials from wherever.
Right.
We could mix them however we wanted, and we could put vape liquid together, and we could sell it to the general public.
Yep.
And that process, I believe, needs some oversight. It's not the same thing with tobacco. I mean, that's just my opinion,
Right.
right? But fact, it's not the same thing as tobacco because in the same scenario, you and I like to smoke cigars. We're not going to go, hey, you know what, in the back, we're going to create a tobacco grow room, right?
Right.
We're going to grow our own plants and we're going to ferment, we're going to ferment it and age it
Right.
and do all these things like in here in the studio, and then we're going to sell cigars. It's not the same thing. All the cigars on the market today come from a farm.
Yep.
Some farms are in the U.S.
Right.
I don't know what the ratio is on the cigars on the market today. I'm guessing 20% of the tobacco is produced in the U.S. 25.
Well, you think
maybe
maybe
75%.
rapper, maybe some rapper. You look
Some
at that.
rapper might be a little higher.
Yeah.
The other majority, 75%, and again, I'm just guessing at the percentages,
Right.
is made in Nicaragua, Dominican, Honduras, Costa Rica, and all these other countries that we talk about
Right.
where these ingredients come from. So to me, it's not even a close comparison. You get two guys that can make something in the closet, and then you've got cigars where tobacco is being grown on a farm.
Yep.
And I just think that's
Yeah, and I think that's where they're trying to make a one size fits all here.
yeah.
And the thing is that there's going to be, this is where it gets really sticky, is because the process to submit these requirements to the FDA and get them approved is a time thing. So bringing stuff to market quickly is going to be affected. But the other thing is it's not for free. There's going to be what's called a user fee calculated based on the requirements submitted.
Yep.
We don't know yet what those costs are because ultimately it's what those costs are that are going to dictate if there's a return on investment to bring the product to market. So that's something we'll know more about that in the upcoming weeks. But I think it's not a good scenario. I'm not telling anyone.
Well, here's an aspect that I thought was interesting, and I'm curious to see if you've ever heard of this in this light. So you can't buy cigarettes online.
You cannot.
As far as I know.
You cannot.
I've never tried. But
there have been cases of, and I've heard there's been issues too.
And I'm assuming that's restricted by the FDA. Or is it?
I'm not sure on that, but it's a tax issue is what it came down to.
But you can buy cigars online.
You could buy cigars online, yeah.
And I think, I don't know if that's in jeopardy. How is that in the ball game that we're playing here with the FDA, or is that?
I think this time around they left it alone. Now,
okay.
Here's the bad news.
Yeah, once they dig their claws in.
There's more regulations coming.
Absolutely.
I mean, the future of this show could be in jeopardy. And, oh, by the way, these warning labels affect advertising, which affects us, too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more things that could happen right now with the next round of this. It's going to get much tougher. So very good point. Very good point on that.
The other thing is, it's not, I don't know if it's illegal or not, I should say, to purchase non-FDA approved products online and use them. Let's say the website is in Europe and you're purchasing something from overseas. Like, is it, what are the legislation and laws against acquiring something that doesn't fall under FDA approval?
That I'm not sure, but I wonder if it's similar to what would happen if you bought a prescription drug in Canada or whatever.
Is that against the law? I don't know.
I just don't know the law on that.
I don't know that.
Yeah. I
can see now cigar as FDA regulations come about, and we don't know what's going to happen. I can see if I'm a cigar manufacturer strengthening my ties with Europe, and I'm sure there's the equivalent of the FDA and all these European.
EU, they have an EU out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I don't know what if there is any legislation on that, but I can see them targeting other countries. Certainly, I can also see if online comes under scrutiny that a lot of people start purchasing their cigars from overseas. Now that's going to raise the price.
Right.
And I think whatever the case, there's going to be an impact on the industry. I just hope we can minimize the impacts to this industry.
Yeah.
I remember Glenn Loop saying that there's, when FDA comes in, there's negotiations that inevitably happen to say, well, we still need to thrive as an industry, and there's a certain amount of pushback to say what's feasible and what's not, kind of thing. Because they, like you said, they can't kill the industry.
I mean, there was some hope that the Office of Management and Budget was going to come back and look at the cost of this and kind of, kind of squash it.
Right.
That obviously didn't happen. There's been some assessments done from an international business standpoint as well. There's the question of Cuban cigars right now. The way it's written right now, every Cuban cigar is going to have to apply for approval.
But that's not in the U.S.
In the U.S., they will. To sell it in the U.S., they'll have to go through the FDA to
Oh, they would if the embargo is lifted. Because the embargo obviously is totally different.
It hasn't been lifted yet, but if it is, there's no Cuban cigars until the approvals happen.
Yeah. Now, I can see people, if this does happen, I can see Cuban cigars becoming more popular because regular cigar smokers have their ways of acquiring Cuban cigars.
Well, that's exactly. So
I can see that black market now kind of booming, right? This is what inevitably happens, right? When we go back to prohibition or any kind of government legislation, as products become more regulated, it grows the black market.
Right.
And I can see the black market for Cuban cigars flourishing as FDA legislation creeps down on the industry.
Yeah, I mean, or another good example, take the Cuban. Let's say there's this special cigar by company XYZ, but to get it marketed in the U.S., it was going to cost too much money. So they sell it to some country overseas, and then you and I go overseas and acquire that product.
Yep.
See, the laws, the regulations also deal with the import of cigars as well. So the import and the distribution piece. So that's where it's going to get a little more sticky as well.
Right. And that's a difficult thing to control. I mean, U.S. Customs has to control the Cuban cigars. And I think they do enough enforcement to not let it flourish into a certain point of, a certain amount of growth.
Right.
But it is regulated. I mean, you've heard of all the people getting the letters and things like that. So there is a system in place. But as the black market grows, that could be even more costly to police.
You mentioned prohibition was a great example of that.
Yeah.
There's other little things, too, that are coming at us. There's now age requirements that are happening. So now anyone under 27 has to show proof of age, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, if there's something I had to say, fine. If I can live with that.
Right.
As far as that one goes, and of course now the elimination of free samples, I wouldn't worry if you're a consumer too much about that, because basically you'll be able to get cigars at events. You'll just have to pay a nominal fee.
Right.
And sorry, retailers, I see a lot of you charging that nominal fee anyway. For events, so I don't see a huge change.
Well,
with that.
I mean, it depends on how strictly they're going to enforce it. If you purchase a ticket to an event, they could say that this much of your ticket price goes to this cigar.
Right.
And so it's not a free sample. I'm paying for the event, I'm paying for the food, and I'm paying for the cigars to attend this event. I don't think that's going to change.
I literally went to an event with Bobby Newman last year. And the way the ticket was structured, great event. The way the ticket was structured is part of your ticket you paid for the cigars, and part of your ticket paid for the dinner.
Right.
And I thought it was so you probably see something like that
happen. Even a free event, though, you charge everyone $1 when they walk through the door.
You can charge everyone. Like I said,
so it's not a free sample. I'm paying $1 for it.
You're paying $1. You're doing some cost recovery, for that. And I see that as
now, probably what they can't do is collect that $1 and then donate it to charity.
Yeah.
But they could say they're matching charitable, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Now, with us, it will affect us because we do rely on some samples, and sometimes we get pre-release stuff. So I don't know what that's going to mean yet either for us.
Right.
I think we got to see how it's too early to tell with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we come out of this as unscathed as possible, but there's certainly going to be some changes to the industry.
Hopefully, it's changed forever. It's going to be changed forever, guys.
Hopefully we work it out and minimize damages.
Don't jump. No civil disobedience. No revolution. We'll persevere.
That's it. Well, thanks everyone for watching Stogie Geeks News. Make sure you check out the live show, stogiegeeks.com/live every Monday night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And check out cigar-coop.com for all the latest news and reviews. Thanks for watching.